Okay, everybody, you guys can all get settled. We're going to get started here again with our Sacred Sites panel and moderated by Professor Tsosie, to whom I will pass it off. Go ahead, Professor Tsosie.
Thank you so much, Annalisa. And Annalisa, I am just thrilled and honored to serve as the moderator for this panel, and I'm going to acknowledge you as the co-moderator of the panel, with much thanks to you, Rebecca, and all of the students who worked so hard on this program and accommodated my last minute schedule change. I have to be in Phoenix today, so thank you very much for accommodating me. So we will be co-facilitators for this amazing panel. And I want to start out by saying how honored I am to have our three speakers today who represent just a wealth of knowledge and leadership experience in very important dimensions of the conversation. Before I get started, out of respect to the students, I'm going to read their intention in creating this panel, and it's been a wonderful conference that they totally created. They selected people. I honor them for that. So what they intended to create was an acknowledgement of our audience and the public who will be listening to this, and by that I mean the public at large and the Indigenous public. And I think sometimes we forget how powerful that Indigenous public is, that they're situated in many places and communities throughout our state and our larger nation. And we want them to be part of this conversation. So we want the public to acknowledge the unique challenges that Native people have in terms of protecting, so that ethic of protecting sacred places that are truly those places of Indigenous people since time immemorial. And that came out so strongly in the first panel today. And I acknowledge the ways in which we are looking at that relationship of place-based people, because it is unique, it is powerful, it is the energy of everything that we're seeking to preserve and protect for the future generations as well. So how do you get that ethic of protection applied to sites? And that is the US legal term. A sacred site is a US legal term. And it probably consists of two things that normally don't go together in the public mind. The concept of the sacred, which people generally put in a category of religion and not public lands, because those are secular, blah, blah, blah. Or this idea of a site, a place that is now off of the trust land that is held in trust ownership by the United States, but in beneficial ownership by the tribal governments. That is the best quality of land available under our current US domestic legal system. But as we know, it's vastly inadequate to protect the interests of the peoples on those places into perpetuity when it's been removed from quote unquote tribal ownership. And I say that in respect to the conversation we just had about the terms ownership and property. So today we see that sacred places are under extreme jeopardy, and the students noted many categories that they are seeing and studying, that they witnessed, that the mining industries, extractive industries, other forms of development, and we are going to talk about some of those forms of development of public lands today and their consequences, pollution, water, land, resources, fish, wildlife, vandalism, and many other public and private actions. And in that category, as we all know, there is a movement to privatize public lands. And that can be done in a number of ways, but what it does is it puts the market system, property ownership in a pivotal position over the values and norms of Indigenous law, as we discussed it this morning. So that is a clash. How do federal agencies that are charged with management of so-called US public lands, how do they navigate the multiple interests of the stakeholders, as well as the Indigenous stewards or custodians of that land since time immemorial, because that was a role that has never been relinquished. And that is what we're talking about with protecting the places. So it's a difficult conversation, but our panelists are definitely up to this conversation. And I, in my role as moderator, am going to introduce them in an order. And then as I go through kind of 3 basic rounds of questions, I'm going to just ask them to follow that order for the sake of ease, because I'm at a distance and not present in the room. And then Annalisa will help me coordinate the questions during the audience time. And I will ask each of our panelists also to contribute to forming the knowledge around the 3 categories of law that the students hoped would get into the mix. Indigenous law, meaning that natural law system that was talked about this morning, the law of the land, so to speak, which is not the same as the law of the US federally recognized tribal governments. That is a different form of law. It could be integrated, but it also might not be integrated. So Indigenous and tribal law, US domestic federal law, statutory law, treaties, the Constitution and what it stands for. And finally, the realm of international human rights law, probably referred to this morning in terms of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but certainly also present in many other instruments of international human rights law. So I'll be going through the rounds of questions and really welcome the commentary. So please allow me to introduce our panelists to you in order that they will speak, and for each round, the same order. First of all, Dr. Wendsler Nosie. I am so honored to welcome you to the University of Arizona, the College of Law. I applaud your leadership. Dr. Nosie has been a longtime member of the San Carlos Apache Tribal Council, as well as an elected chairman of the San Carlos Apache tribe. He served a number of terms from the 1980s until the recent 2000s, a number of terms on the tribal council, which is a very difficult job, and he exercises so much responsibility. He represents the Peridot district. And in his term as tribal chairman, I just wanted to acknowledge that he appointed me and several other people to the San Carlos Apache Court of Appeals, but I'll never forget the ceremony in which he acknowledged that, because he talked about that very law that we were talking about this morning, and about the principles of justice that ought to guide us with respect to the community and the land. It was very moving. I've never forgotten it, and I truly think that his leadership on behalf of the San Carlos Apache tribe was important in many ways, and I can't even do justice to it. But when Congress was getting ready to do that terrible midnight rider that resulted in the catastrophe with respect to Oak Flat, he gave a number of presentations to tribal leaders here in Arizona, around the nation, issuing a number of cautions that have come back to haunt us. And I really think that your foresight in seeing what that represented for all Native peoples, as well as your particular community, was very important. So as many of the audience members know, Dr. Nosie has also been the founder and leader of Apache Stronghold. That litigation currently was argued in the Ninth Circuit en banc, and Dr. Nosie will talk about that case and what it represents. But it really is an example of what we were talking about this morning, that the interests of what we're framing as federally recognized tribal governments sometimes, in terms of the standing requirements, need to be adapted and adjusted to do justice to what is at stake. And so that was a very courageous movement. I could go on and on and on, but I want to say that he is also a faculty colleague. He got his education at in colleges in California and Arizona, but most recently he earned a PhD degree, which is in bioethics and sustainability and global public health in the American University of Sovereign Nations. And he is now a professor of practice teaching about Indigenous knowledge practice in that program. And in that respect, I welcome you as a faculty colleague to talk about what Indigenous knowledge actually means and how you explain that to a variety of constituencies. And finally, I want to acknowledge that he has important as well as political leadership. He's been involved in economic development projects and entrepreneurship, the stewardship of wildlife, fish and wildlife, as a director of San Carlos, their resource department. So he really has a multiple layered leadership, but he has been given a number of honors and awards for his spiritual leadership. And in particular, he got an award from the National Council of Churches, which has like over 30 million members, with respect to his heroic advocacy for Apache spirituality in the context of sacred places, as well as the Presidential Award of the National Progressive Baptist Convention, who designated that as an important civil rights and human rights contribution. And they basically took a world platform, and I believe that was the first time an Indigenous leader from this country has been exalted in that way. So I cannot begin to express how honored I am to welcome Dr. Nosie. Our second presenter is Ashley, and you have a lovely Native Hawaiian name, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce because I didn't get the syllables for it, and I might say something that I don't mean to say. So please forgive me. I'll allow you to introduce yourself in that way. But Ashley Obrey is a senior staff attorney for the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. She is housed out of Kona, Hawaii, and she has we have so many overlapping friends and interests, but I want to say, Ashley, that I've been a fan of yours for many years through my Indigenous colleagues at the University of Hawaii, Manoa, where you got your JD degree in 2009. And I read that amazing Native Hawaiian law treatise that you and the colleagues there put together. I understand you're not only on the first edition, but also working on the second edition. And that truly was the integration of Indigenous law and place. And I think sometimes people don't know how important that work is, but I really honor your efforts there. And also know that you got a degree in journalism from Pepperdine. So you've, spent time, on this land too. So Ashley has been a staff attorney at the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation for many years, and she also served a term working for Kamehameha Schools. So that interest in land management, in education, and in the rights of Native Hawaiian people has always been paramount in your leadership. And I think that also you, I believe, served a clerkship for the state Supreme Court for Chief Justice Ronald Moon. And I think in Hawaii, the situation with respect to land and the institutions that we would designate as the state sometimes have comparable aspects to what the U.S. federal trust responsibility is to federally recognized tribes here. But you have been advocating on both of those levels, on state institutions and federal institutions, to advance Native Hawaiian self-determination over land, over resources, over ancestors, over education. And part of that is in the state constitution. So I think that is a very important thing for our audience to hear as well, how those various institutions and government actors intersect. So thank you so much for being here today. And then Finally, I want to introduce our distinguished alum. Oh, Jared Hautamaki, welcome back to the University of Arizona. We're so excited to welcome you back, and we honor you and the incredible things that you have achieved thus far in your career and your willingness to give back to our students and our community here. So I have to say I have the deepest respect for Jared, who got his JD degree from the University of Arizona James E. Rogers College of Law in 2007. But before he went to University of Arizona, he was my student at the Pre-Law Summer Institute at the University of New Mexico, which is a very elite type of an experience that Indigenous students can select into who are going into law school, but it's very rigorous. It's 8 weeks of essentially torture for them. And one of the classes is federal Indian law, which I taught that year. And I will never forget Jared, because he just brought in all of these perspectives from his community, from his culture, from his experiences, but he made us laugh and he made us think, and he was a PLSI superstar that summer. And we had so many great discussions in that class, and the alums of that class are stars. So Jared is one of those stars, and just has a particular place in my professional life as somebody that I truly admire. So currently, Jared is working as a senior advisor to the Bureau of Indian Education, and we've talked a bit about the discipline of education and what that means. So I think this conversation is part of that. Just prior to that, he was a policy advisor for the White House Council on Native American Affairs. And as was mentioned earlier this morning, the Biden administration's White House efforts have been truly transformative on many levels. So Jared actually led the implementation of the Tribal Treaty and Reserved Rights MOU, as well as the Sacred Sites MOU, and both of those documents very important, really forward-thinking and integrate the various strands of law that we have been talking about. So I'm going to welcome you as we think about that discussion to even comment on how historic that was. But Jared led a team of people on educating federal agency officials on these aspects that we are talking about today. And I had the honor to be part of that series of speakers. And I really thought it was a very important endeavor. Everything that you did on that is deeply appreciated, and I know how hard that was. And before that, he worked for the US EPA in various roles, knowing that lands and resources are so important. So Jared has also an LLM degree from McGill, and he has interests in space and atmosphere law, as well as things that we wouldn't even, kind of put together, but in the realm of Indigenous knowledge, it does all fit together. He is a member of the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians and serves as a reserved justice for their appellate court. He always goes back periodically for his practices. And Jared, I just think the world of you, and thank you so much for being here today. So those are my introductions, and I am going to start, and I have the nice student questions. Or the students thoughtful? They gave you tons of questions, and I know you guys have all seen this, but I actually wanted to start by saying that this whole conversation about the use of colonial terminology and et cetera, if we start on the other end of this, and we just start from the Indigenous point of view about the meaning that ought to be given to sacred places, how you personally understand this concept and why it motivates you in the work that you do and to be here today. That is my first question, just starting with that from an Indigenous perspective. And for you personally, what does that mean? What do we need to see from that term? Dr. Nosie, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I've come here to talk. Again, I just want to say, opening for myself is I just lost a sister, so I'm at two different places at this time. But I wanted to be here because I feel it's really important and crucial to be among you of what you guys are studying, what you guys are learning, or what you're going to career yourself into. Because I think a lot of us have been in the same shoes you've been in. And I guess I'm talking when I was very young to where I'm going to be 64 now, and lived a life of trying to comprehend what we live in and what does it mean without being angry, without being rude, because of what happened to our people. So when we want to wrap around our knowledge around this so that we can give to our young people, that means that you have to go further back. You have to go back to where it began. And why did it start this way? What did the first chapter of American laws that were created? And why were they created? Because what I tell people across the country is that if you try to go to the second chapter and try to heal the American woes that we have, it's never going to happen. Because you're at the second chapter. You're not to where it started from. And so I think I'm a lot different than everybody else, because instead of trying to go up the system to create laws and develop this and develop that, I'm shooting back down to where it originated from. And, you know, from the times of growing up to seeing my grandfather, my father, my uncles crying, I see the women crying, I see the devastation of the reservation with a lot of hardship, a lot of anger. And so that, I guess, what really put me on my journey, because my mother and father, born in the 1920s, were born in a concentration camp. My grandfather, grandmothers, and so on were brought in as prisoners of war. So really, I'm first born reservation. Really think about it. Anybody born after the 1930s are first born on the reservation, where, you know, the process began. So anyway, I mean, there's, you know, for me is you got to go back to the very beginning. Why you guys are here? Why did you guys come? You know, and then for tribes, you know, what happened to us? Because what we're facing today and what we're dealing with really extends from that. Because what I'm learning is not only my culture, my people, but I'm learning about you guys too. You know, what brought you here? Why did you come here? You know, economically, ownership. And then there was a great cry of all the atrocities that were happening on the other side of the world that were colonization, capitalism started from. And the wanting to come to a new world to have a better hopes and dreams. So when I look at that meeting, it contains all of that. And it's a whole big topic of itself that, I mean, it'll take forever, because we're talking about each of us individually, where we have come from and how we came into this boiling pot and how we became to be what we are today. And in order to fix the system going forward, and it involves everybody. And so like what I deal with today is looking at how capitalism has controlled so much, and that, you know, I honestly consider and say, we're a capitalist country. You know, there's no way we can deny it. We're capitalists. Because if you ever put yourself in the Indian people's shoe, you would see how our extended families are being devastated, are being divided out, you know, than your own children, and you become an individual person. And so as people in the Southwest, we're like the oldest and we're the newest, meaning that we're the old to the old ways and we're new to this new custom that has come in. So now we are good people to reference what happened, and we can help. So I tell people, don't get angry with me, because you're listening to somebody in your family like 1,000 years ago, over 500 years ago, traumas and the things that they went through. So it's important that we really learn, you know, from what happened to the beginning to really put a grip on where we're going to go to the future. So, I mean, there's a lot more to say, but if you're asking me that question, it's a huge question, but you have to do the research. You have to know why. And that's why I'm in the fight that I am today. So hopefully I answered, but again, I just want to apologize, because my mind as a Native person, you're normally with your family. It's time of need. But I also thought it was very important for me to be here today with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm deeply, deeply sorry for that loss. I'm so sorry. Ashley?
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. And I hope that just as I start that, bringing a kind of different experience, a very similar but slightly different experience from Hawaii will, I don't know whether it lends support or we can, just the opportunity to learn from each other. So I'm really excited to be here. And I would just say as a Native Hawaiian, we use the word kuleana a lot, and kuleana is the Hawaiian concept of having a responsibility that's also tied to it being a privilege. And I just think as a Hawaiian, it's my kuleana to stand up for our sacred sites and for our resources and for our land. And it's something that's just inside of me as a Native Hawaiian person. And it's really essential to our Hawaiian identity to protect these places, these sites, these things that connect us to our Aina, our land. And that, that makes us who we are. And I know this is the same for, all Indigenous groups. Aina is the Hawaiian word for land. It includes our sacred sites, our wahipana, and it really is intertwined with our identity and self-determination of Native Hawaiians, even today in complex ways, in that the land and these sites are the glue that really holds us together as a people. We're spread out over several main Hawaiian islands, and yet we still have, and even on the continent, and our shared past is connected because of our homeland, because of our lands. And so it's just really significant to me in that way. And I know I'm not speaking to people who haven't heard this before, that we're in a constant struggle to maintain our traditional lifestyles, our cultural and spiritual connection to the natural environment because of colonization and all the impacts and the ever-changing world and all the pressures on our lands, on our resources. And anyway, I'm here because there's this connection of our identity to our lands and our well-being to our identity and our lands. And I just think it's so critical to be a part of it. And it's why I went to law school. So hearing these, questions posed to the audience of why anyone is here and why everyone wants to take these steps to learn about these things so that they can better their people. It's just really important. And I would add at the end here, I mean, it's not an afterthought at all, but it's probably, and it actually should be the first thing I said. I think about my kids. I have a almost 3-year-old and I have a 7-year-old, and I just want to leave this place for them, for their kids, for their grandkids, and to remember the shared history so they can connect with who they are. So yeah, I guess if I could weave through my entire long answer, I think that would be the point, is that we're leaving something better for the next generation.
Thank you, Ashley. It's beautiful. Jared?
Bonjour, Nandishnakas, Jared Hautamaki. I'm from the Sault Ste. Marie Tribe of Chippewa Indians, as Professor Tsosie said. My people come from Bawati, which is the rapids between the United States and Canada, where Lake Superior enters into the St. Mary's River, where our people used to go, where our people still go and harvest whitefish. How do I relate to sacred sites protection? I'm not first generation res. I grew up outside of Detroit. My grandmother was, putting it in historical context, Michigan was colonized a couple of times over. The French came, the British came, then the Americans came. My grandmother is French Canadian and Chippewa, and my grandfather on my paternal side is Finn, Finnish immigrant. We still have the original homestead where he had immigrated in Eben Junction, Michigan, small dairy farming town, Finnish town, not even a town, just there used to be a yellow flashing light there. He raised 10 kids out of a one-room log cabin. Just down the road 2 miles, a little less than 2 miles north, I have 80 acres of my grandparents' homestead. My uncle has 80 to my east, my cousin has 40 to my west, and my property backs to the Rock River Wilderness area in the Hiawatha National Forest. Over the last 5 years, 6 years now, I've been working with USDA and NRCS to reforest my grandparents' former dairy pastures. After this spring, when we have a contractor plant a 2-acre parcel, and I'm going up the first week of May, and I'm going to plant 800 trees and shrubs, berries, nuts, fruit trees, pine. We'll have planted over 10,000 trees since 2017. That is my sacred place. The Rock River Wilderness area. It's not just my 80 acres. It's the 5,000 acres behind me that I can exercise my treaty rights in. And I go out into the forest and I hunt and I fish. We would go there back when my grandparents' house was still upright, before they knocked it over. Cedar log foundation routed a couple of times. That's where we would go and gather. And when relatives were sick, when people passed away, I remember being in the frozen cedar swamp when my grandmother on my mother's side was passing, and I was out hunting, and the sun came out of the clouds at one point, and I was in the cedar swamp, and I knew that she had passed, and made my way back, and sure enough, it had happened. But that is my sacred place, and my property there backs to this canyon where the cedar swamp water goes and flows over, and in the winter, we get 200 inches of snow, and it freezes, and it's what's referred to as the ebb and ice caves. And a neighbor, private property owner, has been developing a national park entrance essentially on their private property. They've built a trail and parking lots and gotten the county to expand the road. And there's sometimes thousands of visitors there during the winter to visit the ice caves. And as more and more tourists come, the deer are changing their migration patterns. And every time I go hunting, I'm pulling more trash out of that canyon when I come back out. And I think Ashley said it, this is an effort to leave this place better than we found it. That was something that my dad instilled in me. And I too have children. I've got 12, 10, 8, and 6. And I hope to purchase additional land up there and continue this effort and leave the place better than I found it, and leave them, a place where they can go and have that same connection. In my orbit, I've been in DC 24 years now. I try not to think about it. I'm getting up there too. 46, but that the orbit, and I use that term as an aviation and space lawyer. The Upper Peninsula just pulls me back. I've been going back for my entire life. I would spend weekends up there, or weeks up there when I was a kid with my grandparents, and going out and standing on the shores of Gitchigumi and hearing the water and the silence. You can be the only person, out there for miles. Is humbling. It puts you back in touch with nature and with yourself, and that is the threat to my sacred place and places. I've lived in Arizona, I've lived in Quebec, and having worked for EPA for the last 15 years, I recognize the threat to not just sacred places, but our planet generally. The fish in Lake Superior that my people rely on come with fish advisories by the state because of the heavy metals that have been deposited and agglomerate through the food chain from power plants in the Midwest, depositing heavy metals and PCBs and mercuries. These are constant issues that not just my people, but our peoples deal with around the country and around the world. Resource exploitation, capitalism, as Dr. Nosie put it. These are dangerous things, and we need to find the balance and bring balance back in order that we leave a place for 7 generations from now.
Thank you. That was beautifully said. And it just reminds me that there's so many efforts to protect that happen on an individual, family kind of level, as you just shared, that tie into the collective treaty rights in a way, but maybe are not as visible to outsiders. But thank you so much for sharing that. And I've never been to that place, but I can see it just as you talk about it. So thank you very much. The next question, and I'm taking the liberty of weaving together some of the student questions in the context of what they wanted to talk about in this panel. But what they really want to know is, with the standpoint that each of you has just expressed about the sacred value of these places in the life of the people, the continuing life of the people, and honoring the ancestors who are no longer with us too. How do we use the law, or how do we see the law as that bridge between the meaning that Indigenous law gives to the place and that you honor in the survival of the people, the meaning of that versus how US federal law or maybe state law or something else makes you use a different legal system to protect it? And Dr. Nosie has been working tirelessly on behalf of Oak Flat. So that was really very important to the students to hear the meaning of that place, and then what is happening now, and what the use of the US legal system to defend that place, what that experience has been like. And with respect to Ashley, after Dr. Nosie, they really want to know about Mauna Kea and that whole experience. And Jared, when we get to you, they really want to know how hard it was to create those MOUs, whether there was traction. How do you see the law and the change in policy helping students? So those are just things to think about as we engage this. Please take your time as you respond to those questions, but that was the meaning in which the students intended. So Dr. Nosie, please go first.
Okay. Hopefully I cover this with good understanding to all of you. In my opening remarks, I referred to that because I sent a letter to the United States Congress and the USDA that I was going home. So 2.5 years ago, I have moved to Oak Flats to Tribe of Chippewa, and during the summer, I'm at Mount Graham, just in Sault Ste. And in my letter, I told the United States, because of their federal policies, it forced me to do this. So as you know, in these places, you are only allowed for 13 days. Or either if you're an enrolled member of a tribe, your tribal leadership has to inform them that we're coming to this place. And so I told the tribal government that there's complete negligence here and human injustice that's going on, and promises that were made to our people that is housed in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but first the military, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and everybody else who did so many studies on us. And I said, for that negligence of going to destroy our holy place, I'm going home. So I've been there for 2.5 years. These places are not only holy to us, but it's holy to so many people of different nationalities who have come here. And not only that, it creates a really big environmental impact that's going to happen to the southwest of this country. Because you're talking about mountains, talking about where clouds, where all this is formed. And you're talking about an identity of a people. You're talking about a culture that's been here since the time of the beginning. And so I went home. So my point is kind of opposite of what we're kind of talking about. We're trying to build the government build itself. There's policies and laws, and then everybody's trying to fit into that box. And so with me being the tribal chairman, tribal council, and being the person that I am, seeing that there's no remedy happening right now. And the reason why I said it when we asked this question about how the laws can bridge between, Native, I mean, I got a whole different point of view on that, honestly, because of this court case. Because this court case, the U.S. attorney made it clear that these government lands, they will do as will with these lands, which means that any government land, which means that Native reservations are under threat as well too. And their argument, their argument is so ludicrous when it comes to when have you been here, how long have you been here, what happened to all that information when we're exiled out of these places and places prisoners of war, and our people being killed in prison, punished for going back to these places. And it's really, heartfelt when you hear the argument as though we don't exist or we just barely came here and these ties didn't actually happen. But yet you have all these historical remnants that are there, burial grounds to, our people where they live, the relationships they had with different tribes. There was already an economic system here that was already established way before. And so when we say, how do we bridge this? I come back to the basic thing when I talk about how capitalism has influenced the religion. Because I think all of us in here have some kind of religious tie. And that religious tie is so critical because that ties us to the earth. And the reason why I say this is because I spoke to so many people from the European world and as well as the American people today. And what really blows me away is when the American people here tell me, well, Wendsler, when you talk about ancestors, I get kind of confused because we can't go back as far as you can. You can go back and back and back and back, but we can only go back to when our people came to New York when the boats were coming in. But we were told to disconnect ourselves from the European world, disconnect ourselves from our identity, to be Americans. And then I tell them that that's really frightening for us because there's no such thing as Americans. We all have a rooted place that we came from. And those are real critical because those rooted place that we came from makes us understand the Mother Earth. And so you can see how this corporate world has influenced the religion because, and not to offend anybody in here, and I tell it everywhere I go, but I see what they're doing because they're doing the same thing to us. We have our religious places on the mountain and they're putting us on the reservation and they're having us do our ceremonies on the reservations. And then they're saying, well, your religion can move here and there. It's not just on the mountain. God can hear you anywhere. And we tell them no, because on this mountain has angels, gone people who are the buffer between heaven and earth, that are here for the people, and that brought the religion, that brought the way we are, how we intertwine with the mother. But to put us here is what they want. And so when I go to our ceremonies on the reservation, I'm looking like, their tactics in their law is really working by placing us on the reservation and saying, it's okay, we respect your religion, it's right here. But from this court case, what it revealed, more of an understanding was in the final EIS, a white lady who had a spiritual connection with our angels. When this was submitted to the United States, it was that some reason that as Native people you have, hey, they might have done something, I'm going to double check this. And everything that we submitted as Native people were in there. The only one that was taken out was the white lady. So I asked the United States, why did you take her out? Well, she's white. Okay, I know that, but she had a spiritual connection with our angel. Why did you take her out? Because she's white. I know that, but why? Well, they have a Bible, they have a church. Oh, okay, so you can grant them an exercise of religion, but you will not grant them a spiritual happening in America. And that's the United States position. So if you see a lot of these sacred sites and arguments are going on, why white people can't help, it's because of that reason. So I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So when the European people first came, they were stuck in churches, they were given their Bible, they were in these places. Stay off the land that we want and we're going to use. And I say that because they're doing it to us. They're doing the same thing they did to you guys, to us. So we say, now how do we fix the law on that? How do we fix it? It's really going to take the people of America to understand the box, the frame that they live on. So I tell people that the Native people, we feel the shackles. We're trying to ignore it like it doesn't exist, but it's there. I said, the difference with you is you're wearing the same thing, but you just had it on longer that you made it a part of your life. And that's what scares them, because if you take those two and you put the law on the person, then the law will begin to protect the earth people. But as long as the law is within the corporation is given to them and you're trying to fix it, it's never going to be fixed. Because that's where that capitalism comes in. So when we say, looking at down the road, it's like what we're all doing here. And I think I heard it in the last session. Tell the truth to the children. Because if these children are going to come up to help fix the law, then it'll be fixed. Because what I face here in this predicament that we're in is the fact that the United States Congress exempt all these federal laws that supposedly everybody works so hard to make this country better, but they're exempt. They're exempt. So everything that we talk about is null and void. You can't even bring it up. So that's why I have to say I really admire my attorneys, because they're fighting the United States with no arms. And where we're fighting is the religious part. Because anything that we will fight environmentally, it will be thrown out of the courts because they're already exempt. So even though we create great laws, what does our leaders do? And who do they do it for? So that means that we have to begin to teach some moral integrity to our children so that when they hold these capacities of these powerful seats, they will really enforce the laws or the new laws that we create to protect what's left. But as long as we're going down this road, it's not going to be protected. Just like I heard the other night, it was a really great session the other night, but I'm like, how come they don't visit Oak Flats? How come everything they're saying, they're not visiting Oak Flats? How come Debbie Holland, I think that's her name, stays away from Oak Flats? Because if you work for the government, you're mandated by the government, no matter what happens at the White House. And so like just yesterday, the United States had a secret meeting on Oak Flats to move forward without following the laws that we say we want to create. So when we say, how do we bridge? How do we bridge it? Well, man, my answer to that is that we all are in this fight together. And then we have to find a way to make sure that we protect what's left and hold our politicians accountable for what they're doing. But yes, continue to create these laws, continue. But we've got to remember that it's got to keep being enforced. We've got to make sure that these kind of laws that are important to this country are not exempt. And, so hopefully I'm giving you something outside of the box that you're learning, because it comes down to the political people, it comes down to corporations, it comes down to how everything's intertwined all over the world. Because now when I go to Washington, they tell me, go to England, talk to Rio Tinto. When it was on the telescopes, go to Germany, go to Italy. So I was been in all these different places, and I'll be flying back thinking, hey, I thought these Congress people are the ones that are in charge. But that was the economy, how it's all intertwined. So when you go into what you're trying to do, it's good to know all those different avenues that are outlets that really destroys the law. But I'm not saying don't create it, do the best that you can. But again, like I was saying, I was in the same boat, believing the United States, believing all these ways that we're going to protect. And now where I'm at, I'm like, man, that's why I vacated the reservation. That's why I went home. They're supposed to arrest me, but they're not going to arrest me because why? It's going to hit national news that the religion is under attack. And that's why you have to come back between the way I look at it is the way corporation is influencing the religion, which ties to the earth, that if they can keep that out, then what happens, they have all will of wanting to do what they want to do. Because you have to listen to our court case. And that's what's turning so many Americans in this country from our court case. Because they're realizing that what's happening in Oak Flats and the decision the United States is going to make is against all Native people, but all Americans too. Because it wants to make sure it defines that you don't have a spiritual connection. You have a church, you have a Bible. Indian people, you have your reservation, go dance and perform in there. Stay off the natural resources we want. Sure, they're going to sound good by here and there, but you have to look at the land base. If it's, if it's the land base of these resources that they can sell, then they're going to do as well what they want. And that's what they're making clear in our court. And so when they asked me, how do you feel? Is this a win or loss? I said, hey, I know the old people before me are happy because what they wanted to do was to shake that tree, let the evil pop itself out. And it's the rest of the American people to see that evil that sits, because in the beginning, we thought it was the white people who came here to do these ugly things. But now we know where it is, it's capitalism. That's the ugly thing. And that's why when we develop these laws and how we're going to bridge, those are really in crucial parts that you really need to look at. Because if you're creating a law for corporations, then they're always going to win this. So just as I see it, that's how we can look at bridging these laws, but to understand what we're really facing. And a lot of people don't want to hear what we're saying, because you're talking about their 401ks, you're talking about their, all these things that they're invested in. We have a big group in New York that wants to support Oak Flats. They're coming out, but then they backed up because they didn't know their 401ks were tied into mining. So it's all intertwined. So again, that's why I said you have to go back to the beginning to see how it all transform itself to have a good idea of where we're going to go for the future. Sorry for a long.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly powerful and very honest, and we appreciate it. You make things visible that I think are very important and that we don't all see those connections. So thank you so much. Ashley?
Sure. So I think this is a very complex and interesting question, and it's actually perfect because I think that's what the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, where I work, that's kind of what we do in terms of trying to integrate Native values into Western law and how to marry the two a little bit better and give a voice to Hawaiians in a way that maybe they wouldn't have if not for people who really understand where they're coming from. So just as a little bit of background, our organization started in the 1970s, and it was really just kind of a lawyer-run referral service to help Native Hawaiian families protect ancestral lands from quiet title actions, usually from bigger corporations trying to, sneak some parcel of land out and take it into their larger conglomeration of lands. And over the years, it had evolved. And basically, we work through legal and other advocacy to perpetuate rights, customs, and practices that strengthen Native Hawaiian identity, and focusing specifically on, protecting ancestral and public trust lands, natural and cultural resources, access to places, and the protection of our language. among other things. But so this is really the space that we work in pretty well, I think. And even though the system, clearly is hostile to Native Hawaiians, to Indigenous people, in terms of the state law, our state courts have shown really great promise in restoring justice. And I think it's kind of like what Dr. Nosie said, though, it's about giving teeth to the law and making sure that it's enforced. So that's some of the difficulties. But so in Hawaii, just as a little bit of background, we have a pretty solid constitution that there's a specific provision that reaffirms and protects all traditional and customary rights of Native Hawaiians. So of course, this includes our religious, spiritual, and ceremonial practices. And there's been codification of laws in terms of access rights, historic preservation and burial protection, water rights, all in our statutes. So that's pretty great. And over the last handful of decades, we've built upon that, developing a really great body of case law that defines and builds upon that constitutional provision and reconfirms the rights and duties of the state to ensure that our rights are protected. One really great case that came out, oh man, it's been about 30 years now, but requires the state when it grants any permits or moves forward with any plan that touches on land use to identify traditional and customary practices that may be impacted by whatever project or plan that they're putting forth, figure out what those impacts are and how they can be mitigated. And so they're required to make these findings and as part of their decision-making process. So it really is a procedural mechanism, but oftentimes helps us move the needle forward in protecting something larger where we may not have had that ability to before. But when people are in the court system, especially as plaintiffs, there's a huge burden. And when you think about it being a Native Hawaiian who, really his only interest may be protecting a fishery, down the road from his home, it's a big bear to go to court. I mean, and I'm sure we all understand that. And there's a court filing fee. You're fighting an uphill battle against a corporation or the state where capitalism is involved, and just makes it a lot harder to fight. And there's experts that you need to bring to prove your case, and it can be a really difficult job trying to prove a negative, to say that the state failed to do something or that the landowner failed to do something. But we have seen time and time again in Hawaii about how the Supreme Court here reaffirms the importance and need for protection of these rights. And we actually had a recent court case, and this is where I'm kind of segue finally into Mauna Kea, that reconfirms that the state has to consider these practices and do that same analysis I talked about, even when it's promulgating rules. So we had brought a case against the University of Hawaii, who manages Mauna Kea. They promulgated rules in 2020 that really impacted Native Hawaiian practitioners more than anything. It was meant to kind of manage public and commercial use of the site. But basically, it doesn't allow people to go in certain places, to be there at certain times of the day or night. And so there was a worry that these rules were regulating our rights out of existence. And so we had brought a court case in the circuit court, but our judge then wanted to go up to the Hawaii Supreme Court. They sent what's called a reserved question, and the Hawaii Supreme Court was able to opine on what burden of proof we have and what the state's responsibility is when it comes to drafting rules and how they're supposed to think about Native Hawaiians when they do so. So we just got this decision that basically said that the state has to consider and protect practices, not only for permitting, not only for planning, but also when it drafts rules. And the burden of proof for a plaintiff who wants to challenge rules under that constitutional provision that protects our practices is we just have to show that the rules were not, or the rights were not adequately considered and protected, as opposed to a beyond a reasonable doubt standard. So pretty important. But Mauna Kea, I kind of just went too far in that, and I should take a step back. I mean, I think it's fair to say that, you know, sacred spaces can be your backyard. Just, you know, like Jared was saying, that it's kind of what we make of it in terms of our connection. But Mauna Kea is considered to be the piko of Hawaii. The piko is like your umbilical cord, the center of everything. It's so tall that it reaches our Wau'akua, which is, you know, where all our gods reside. And so, you know, it's just a very important place for people to go to. So there's a lot of ceremony there. People will take their child's umbilical cord and take it to the lake there and deposit it, and it's part of a ceremonial practice. There are burials there, navigation practices. And the interesting thing is that Mauna Kea consists of ceded lands, which are supposed to be held in trust for Native Hawaiians until their claims about the overthrow and all of that are resolved. The state leases the land to the University of Hawaii for $1 a year, and the subleases to the telescopes, these telescope time, are worth tens of thousands of dollars for a night of viewing. And so the state, the public land trust is not making anything from it, but you know, so there's a lot of kind of interesting issues going on a place that Hawaiians feel should not be touched in that way. But so NHLC, like I said, we've done that case addressing the rules on Mauna Kea. We have an ongoing case that's before our Hawaii Supreme Court now, so we haven't had oral argument yet, but addressing the ownership of the Mauna Kea access road, which is basically the one way that telescope employees, university employees, the public can get up to the summit. That road is within the Hawaiian Homelands Trust, which is also a separate trust that's meant to benefit Native Hawaiians. And we're just working out breach of trust issues there, whether the state breached its trust duties to Native Hawaiians and to the trust by just taking over that road during those protests in 2019 and trying to close the road so Hawaiians couldn't go up there. In the past, we've also addressed emergency rules that were passed on Mauna Kea, which prohibited camping or so being there at night. And we were able to get those overturned, saying that the state can no longer arrest innocent people who are on Mauna Kea for cultural or spiritual reasons. We've addressed the sublease that was the university issued to the 30-meter telescope, and whether or not a Native Hawaiian was entitled to a hearing prior to the issuance of that sublease because his rights would be affected. And the answer was yes, he should have had the right to the hearing first. NHLC, although we don't do criminal work largely, we did assist with some defense of folks who were arrested in 2015 because they were standing on the mountain, standing on the road to protect their mountain. And more recently, we've been involved in a National Science Foundation consultation for funding for the 30-meter telescope. But we've requested to become a consulting party and have not gotten any response for months now. So we're doing our best. But I guess all that to say, I know that's a lot. It's a huge mouthful. I'm happy to, delve into anything today or in the future by email or whatever, but we do our best to use the tools and legal schemes that exist. So environmental laws, historic preservation laws, to come at it from whatever angle we can with the ultimate goal of protecting the places and practices, even if it's not always as straightforward as it could be. So yeah, sorry, I will give up my time now. I've been talking a lot.
Thank you, Ashley. And it's so complicated the way that you're describing it, but you do a beautiful job of illustrating the different ways and techniques that the law can be deployed in ways that we wouldn't even think of. So what brilliant advocacy. Thank you so much. Jared.
Before I jump to the MOUs, I've got to do a couple. I want to go back a little bit. But I got to lead off with a disclaimer that I forgot to give in, when I first spoke. I'm here in my personal capacity. I am not representing the views of the United States government in any form. The information I give about the Treaty Rights MOU, the Sacred Sites MOU, that's my personal experience. It is not speaking on behalf of the United States government at all. So let's just throw that out there. So before I get to the MOUs, I want to back up a little bit, because we are talking about law and we are talking about the disregard of law. Going back a little bit, I want to explain how I came to law. I was a theater major in undergrad, and through the study of theater history, I got interested in how theater was used as a means of power. And the morality plays of the church in the 14 and 1500s, all the way through the free speech movement in Berkeley, and agitprop theater, running a pig for president at the Democratic National Convention in 1968. And I was running home in between rehearsals to watch Judiciary Committee hearings of the Clinton impeachment. Then I was watching Congressman John Conyers Jr. and it occurred to me that we knew what the votes were in the House. We knew they wouldn't have the votes in the Senate to convict. And I was like, this is just theater. Why are we doing this? And I said, if she can get an internship in the White House, I've got to be able to do something. And, that's, me being, the theater undergrad, punk rock, indie rock, anti-authority kind of, mentality. So I went to one of my professors. I was starting to study political science as it blended with theater history. And she happened to be the recording secretary for the Michigan State Democratic Party. And she said, oh, the state party convention Saturday, why don't you come? I'll introduce you to the local congressman. So I went, and she said, this is my student. He's interested in an internship. And Congressman Jim Barsha, who represented the Saginaw Flint area, said, well, you start in May. Is $2,200 a month okay? And I was like, what? That was easy. How did that happen? No background check, no nothing. So I came to DC and I did an internship with Mr. Barsha, and then I spent 5 years with Congressman John Conyers Jr. And Congressman Conyers, wrote the Voting Rights Act, wrote the Motor Voter Bill, the Help America Vote Act. I was in DC in the congressional office in the Rayburn building on 9/11, when Capitol was when Washington was attacked, when the country was attacked. We had anthrax, etc. But through it all, we also had Bush v. Gore, and we had a Supreme Court that overturned the counting of ballots on a state law issue, overturning a state Supreme Court, and saying that this is not precedential, it can't be applied in the future. This is getting me go. Let me try and speed up a little here. My point I'm trying to make here is that, well, I want to tie it into a Thomas Pynchon quote as well. Gravity's rainbow. It's a bastardization of a Chinese or Asian quote. Injustice cannot conquer principle. Principle cannot conquer law. Law cannot conquer power. And power cannot conquer heaven. I wanted to take that to the next step, which is something I've thought about throughout my 20-some years of involvement on the Hill and in the executive branch. Is the quote that there is no such thing as law. There's only political history, and it's written by the winners. We see that time and again, and we see that in this case, in the Oak Flats Apache Stronghold case. We have our treaties. The Apache have a treaty, and Justice Gould stopped the U.S. Forest Service DOJ attorney, I'm not sure which she was actually a part of, and asked, there's a provision in the Apache treaty that says that the United States must pass and execute in their territory such laws as may be deemed conducive to the prosperity and happiness of said Indians. And he said, does that apply to, to Oak Flats and this religious, does that supersede the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Railupa arguments. And she said, no, it's too general. Supreme Court case in another Navajo Nation case says that it's too general to create substantive rights. DOJ and USDA are both a party to the Treaty and Reserved Rights MOU, and were instrumental in developing best practices document that came out of that was announced by President Biden last year at the Tribal Nation Summit. And let me pull up the language that they agreed to. Treaties are substantive federal law of equal importance to other federal laws and obligations. Federal agencies must give effect to treaty rights and should seek to safeguard them as agencies contemplate action. When a federal agency is engaging in certain regulatory or other decision-making processes with tribal implications, the agency must engage through consultation with tribes to determine whether tribal treaty or reserved rights would be impacted by the proposed federal action. USDA and DOJ are both a party to this, and were both instrumental in developing that language. But the DOJ attorney 2 weeks ago said, treaties don't create substantive rights. They're too general. This provision is too general. But the Indian canons of construction say that treaties are to be interpreted as the tribes understood them as they were being made. There is no law. There's only power, and as Dr. Nosie was referring, resources extraction, it's billions of dollars. It's the second largest copper deposit in the world, after they've extracted all the copper out of northern Michigan. These are bring it back around to a little culture. The band Pavement has a song, Speak, See, Remember. They have a line in there that says, stand back. Expansion is what we do the best. And this ties to my second law degree, is in international aviation and outer space law. Outer space law is all treaties. And the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Agreement talk about the moon and other celestial bodies are the common heritage of mankind, and they're to be utilized peacefully. No claims of sovereignty can be made on these bodies. But here we have multiple countries passing laws about property rights in asteroid mining, and we have Elon Musk about to launch Starship next week. That's his railroad to Mars. We're in an age of billionaire oligarchs, and these are the railroads to the next colonies. We're colonizing space. We're colonizing other planets for more resource extraction. I'm a cynical idealist. I'm a punk that has worked for Congress. I reject authority, but I've been working for Congress for 5 years, writing statutory laws, and then the last 15 years I've been working for executive agencies, implementing them. I wanted to see how the levers of power worked, and I was pretty cynical going in, but on the Hill, when I was there in 2000, there was a lot of young people there trying to do the right things on both sides. It was bad. I mean, it was, the Republican Democrat thing was bad, but it's only gotten worse. I heard in the last panel, somebody talked about this administration being the best on Native rights that they've seen. And I have to agree. In the 24 years I've now been in the DC area, the best part of this administration is it's all people I know and have known for the last 20 years. Heather Dawn Thompson, the Office of Tribal Relations Director at the USDA, was sending emails out to Native congressional staff before there was a Native congressional staff organization, telling us about jobs and housing and receptions. Congressman Dale Kildee introduced me to Brian Newland back when Brian was interning for Congressman Kildee. Brian is the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs. Deb Holland was our TA, one of our 4 TAs at the Pre-Law Summer Institute. Was Van Garriott, the Deputy Assistant Secretary, was a year behind me at U of A. Morgan Rodman, the Executive Director of the White House Council, was 2 years behind me at U of A. Darren Carrero, the White House Domestic Policy Council Senior Advisor for Native American Affairs, was a classmate of ours at PLSI. Sean DeShane, who is a political appointee at Commerce in economic development, PLSI. There are a lot of people trying to do the right things right now, and that brings me to the MOUs. I'm sorry for that tangent, but the MOUs were an effort to expand upon MOUs that were developed under the Obama administration. The Sacred Sites MOU was developed first in 2012. The Treaty Rights MOU was signed when I was a special assistant in the Office of the Administrator at EPA in 2016 at the end of the Obama administration. And parts of it weren't implemented by the Trump administration. We wanted to take those MOUs and expand upon them, strengthen them, so that they would have some teeth and that they could force some collaboration and further consultation. The administration issued a presidential memorandum in the first day or 2 of office, talking about expanding and strengthening tribal consultation partnerships and tribal consultation and tribal partnerships. And agencies had been revising their consultation policies since then. But the Treaty Rights MOU, we took that and we were taking the momentum from the consultation efforts, and we added some teeth to the MOUs. We required monthly meetings of the working group, where the previous MOU had just established a working group, but then it never met. We required annual reporting on consultations that touch on treaty rights and what the results of those were. From the Treaty Right MOU working group to the Executive Director of the White House Council. We added language, we expanded the Treaty Rights MOU to include reserved rights, off-reservation rights to hunt and fish. Those are huge in areas like Michigan, where my reservation's a couple of square miles, but we have hunting and fishing rights over 2/3 of the state. There was an additional area we tried to strengthen it. We added references to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which weren't there before. And we got pushback from both DOJ and EPA, saying that it's not valid law. It doesn't bind the United States. And we said, no, the United States has acceded to the moral and political force that it has. And coming from the international law degree in aviation and space and international law, in a Canadian academic setting, it was a eye-opening that the respect that other countries give to international law that the United States just glosses over. Domestic law is king, and we're the superpower, so everybody should bow to us. The academic setting there, it was really eye-opening in terms of power that international law has as a moral force. So we included the UN Declaration, and we got those references in. We got the working group started, and that was announced at the. We expanded it from 9 signatories to 17. DOJ being one of them, USDA being one of them. That was announced at the 2021 Tribal Nation Summit. In the summer of 2022, Morgan pulled me over to the White House Council to help implement, since I'd been leading the working group after drafting the MOU. And we developed the best practices documents. And again, we got pushback on inclusion of references to the UN Declaration. We got pushback on the substantive, treaties are substantive federal law of equal importance to other federal laws from, again, DOJ and EPA. But we overcame them. We overcame it. We had Brian talk to the political leadership of those other agencies, and we got it in there. And the other, then we went out for tribal consultation, and we included language about consensus. Then we talked about, at the end of the last panel, there was some discussion of free, prior, and informed consent. And, it's not the position of the United States, but we have moved the needle from consultation, where a federal agency says it engages in consultation by offering consultation to a tribe, and it may or may not be accepted, but the agency will check the box and say it was offered, consultation was a success. We offered it, they didn't take it up. But we've moved that needle to getting a presidential memorandum out of the White House on uniform standards of tribal consultation that says agencies have to strive for consensus. That isn't free, prior, and informed consent, but it's moving the needle. It's consultation, consensus, and consent are a continuum, and this administration has moved federal Indian policy in that direction. One of the other things that I saw out of this administration is there was some language in that initial memo talking about tribal partnerships, and I saw as part of the cornerstones of their federal Indian policy, and it hasn't been an announcement like the Nixon announcement of the end of termination and the transition to self-determination. But there is some movement, and there's been discussions at NCAI and the California Indian Bar and a couple of others about federal Indian policy and in an era of self-determination and partnership. So the needle is moving. There is some optimism. There are these MOUs. That the Sacred Sites MOU only has 9 signatories, but that again is an improvement from the last version. It has some additional requirements that the previous version doesn't have. Developing a best practices document, that's underway at this point. And then training. Training was the other thing that came out of both the Sacred Sites MOU and the Treaty Rights MOU. And as Professor Tsosie alluded, she was one of our first speakers on the Treaty and Reserved Rights speaker series, where we're teaching federal Indian law and about treaties to federal employees. And we've gotten between 150 and 300 on each of our sessions. We started off with Dean Stacy Leeds. We had Professor Tsosie, Dean Elizabeth Cronk-Warner, and most recently, Professor Matthew Fletcher. So we are getting these concepts out there and in front of federal employees. But it's a challenge. The political leadership is one thing, federal employees are another. I led EPA's internal consultation reforms, responding to the January 26, 2021 Biden memorandum on strengthening tribal consultation. And I had tribal consultation advisors, that's their role at EPA, tell me that we're the federal government. We have no obligation to consult. I had another one tell me that striving for consensus would change their office process, and they would never agree to that. But the political leadership got it through. So it's a struggle. There's a tension. The political leadership, the entrenched bureaucracy, that gave me a new appreciation for Trump's concept of the deep state. You do have to move the bureaucratic employees and get them to understand where the administration is going, and sometimes you have to push. So that's a long way of trying to get to the question that was asked, and I apologize for being verbose and going on a couple of tangents, but I wanted to weave some threads together to get to those ideas and bring those to a place in this discussion.
Thank you, Jared. And on behalf of myself and everybody, I just want to say how much we appreciate your courageous leadership within that structure. And the fact that you can actually sit here today and explain that to us, it exhibits that the US isn't just an entity, right? It's all these sub entities, and they have to have a process to agree or not agree. And you're right in the middle of that. So thank you so much for your courage, your leadership and advocacy. I have gotten permission to have one last question, and then of course go over just a couple of minutes and Rebecca's going to help me get audience questions. The last question that I'm going to ask of our speakers, and again, huge thanks to each of you. I know that your lives are complicated in ways that I can't even understand, and that you took the time to be here to share this is the most meaningful to me. Thank you so much. So the last question is because our students want to have, they want to have hope. They want to have hope for the future. They want to have a sense of excitement. And what they're really interested in knowing is what would you offer to that? And if I might just tee it up based on what you have all just described to me, one of the things, the playbook of colonialism has always been divide and conquer. And the students at U of A always impress me, and I love them because they won't do that. There are members of federally recognized tribes. There are members of tribes that aren't federally recognized. There are other Indigenous peoples from all continents. There are non-Indigenous students who want to do the right thing and really wish the United States had a better moral compass. They are very inclusive across the borderlands, and they really want to come together. And it strikes me that that UN Declaration language, for example, around spiritual rights of Indigenous peoples takes us out of the box that Dr. Nosie talked about, because the box is like the other tool of colonialism, right? As long as you're in the box, you just work around the margins to do small things. But if you get outside of the box, that's where the hope and the possibility and the energy of regeneration, that's where it all lives. But the question is, what do you want to impart to students, faculty, and others who might be listening in to motivate us to be out of the box into the hope? Anything you want to say about that in your concluding comments would be so welcome. Dr. Nosie?
I guess when I was young, I always remember the day, I guess when I began to understand things, when my mother took me outside, and in our language, she was telling me that so many things are going to be said in this world. So many things are going to be complicated in this world. But Eve, look, that's real. She pointed to the trees, she pointed to the water, she pointed to the sky, and to breathe. That is real, son. In this world, it's going to be so complicated. But in this way of making it complicated, it's going to detach you from the most important gift that the Creator gave us. I don't know what's going to happen, she used to say, but it doesn't look good. But what you need to understand is this. And then she gave me another example, because my daughter was a really good cross-country runner, but her team wasn't. And now my mom is of old age and she got to learn the concept of cross-country. And she told me, she says, son, she says, your daughter works really hard. I see her running in the morning, running in the evening. She's praying. She's winning all these races, but her team isn't. And if only her team would work a little harder, the way I understand it, they'll start winning. But your daughter Angel's winning. And she looked at me when it came to the old flat fight. She says to me, remember I told you about your daughter? And remember you told me that the last race of regionals, the girls finally placed, and the daughter was so excited. She forgot about her individual medal. She was so excited for all the girls going to state and just hugging them and crying. You know, we just seen a whole different person out of her. And she says to me, she says, that's life. Be where you're supposed to be. And hopefully the rest of them will be where they should be. Then the change will come. She says, don't hate, go out there, because we're supposed to be wiped out on the face of the earth. But there are some of those people who did what they did to save us. But now you have to go and find them. So when I look at the stronghold, what I'm doing is actually doing that, because this isn't an Apache fight. This isn't a Native American fight. This is a fight for our survival, all of us. So those movements are on right now, but we need the people. We need the people to be where they should be. So wherever you are and what you're doing the right thing. Just know that we're going to all meet, you know, to save what's left. And now that, you know, with all the native people I've sat with across the country, is their worries is this. And when I sit with the white people, their worries are this. When I sit with the black people, their worries are this. When I sit with the Asians, so forth. It's the same worries. It's the same thing that has happened to you all that's happening to us. And, you know, we're trying to find a way to explain it to you, because those concepts that are put in place that we believe are supposed to protect us is overrun by human thinking, human want. And I guess I'll end with when I was eating in the town of Globe, this restaurant that probably holds about 45 people. I was sitting there, and I'm careful where I eat. You know, my life is on a threat right now from all the mining people. So I'm careful where I eat. It's only certain places I eat or people will order for me. But anyway, I was able to sneak into the restaurant, dressed different, not looking like the way I'm looking right now. I figured, okay. So I sat there quietly and I started eating, but a group of guys came in. They were all in suits. And they just remind me of some of these movies that go on. You can't believe it's happening in your life. But anyway, they come in. And so they recognize me, and the one guy gets up and he stands up in front of me and he talks to everybody in the restaurant. He says, so you're Wendsler Nosie, the guy that's stopping the mining. Listen, people, he's stopping economic development for Arizona. He's stopping technology for new cars, computers, and they name all this stuff. Employment, you know, revenue base, taxation for the low mining towns. He said, this is the guy. So he was like mocking me, making fun of me. I mean, because I wasn't dressed like him. And so anyway, all the people in the restaurant were quiet. And so he said everything. So I told him, I said, I don't want you to think I'm going to do anything. I'm just going to stand up. I'm just not used to somebody talking over me. So I stood up and I turned to the people. I said, do you know what he just did? Because he's talking about all you. He's talking about all you. He's talking about all the things that you want and all the things that you're not satisfied with. All the greed, all these things. I said, he's not talking to me. He's talking to you. I'm happy. Happy with what I got. I'm content, you know, and I'm going to save everything I can. I said, I'm hated for protecting the water. I'm hated for protecting the land. I'm hated for protecting, you know, the climate. I'm hated for protecting the children, your children, everybody. You know, I'm hated for that. I'd rather be hated for that, I guess. I said, but he's talking about you. He's saying that they're not going to stop until you say that enough. You control them. But because our weakness in what we're doing and what we want, we're letting him control us. I don't know how else to tell you this. Because this American dream that is an American dream that they say this is not. It's an illusion. All these things are free already. There's medicine plants, pure water, all these things are there already. I know that we have to progress in the future, but nobody put restrictions to tell you when is enough. I said, so if you're giving your children your phone at 6 years old, 5 years old, they're watching already, you're already 30 years behind the fight. Because they're going to fight you for that. They're going to want more. I said, there's no restrictions, nothing. I said, but the restrictions should come from us about how important the earth is to us. So I said, but anyway, I said, thank you for telling all the people in here, because they need to hear what you had to say. And he was pretty pissed. He turned around. They sat for a second. They got up. Right when they're walking out the door, all the people clapped. And these were Native people. And some guys came over and tapped, their hand on my back and said, we're with you, but we can't see them. We're with you because we live in a mining town where Chamber of Commerce, everybody controls the mining towns. We can't go, we're stuck. But we're with you because we're dying from cancer. My sister just died from cancer. My family's dying from cancer. My dad was a miner. He didn't know. So all these people are dying. You go through the town of Globe, Miami, those kids, it's a normal life. They do the 4th of July on top of a tailing, an ugly tailing. And everybody has their hot dogs, hamburgers, everybody's singing whatever, the American birth of America. I'm like, I said, on top of trash, and all the kids are running around, and it blows me away, and that's why I said it goes back to the first chapter. You have to go back to the first chapter. And I think the way I feel 64 years now, from being 22 years old when I first went to Washington to now, I see that hope. But we just got to keep moving and wake up. And we are. I have that hope. That's why I'm fighting this fight. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I've seen white people, black people, Asians, and Native Americans, Mexicans. We're all doing our part, but it has to be bigger. And every case is unique in this country. Every sacred land that's being destroyed, it referenced European country. Same thing happened there. It's happening here. And my mother used to say, when I went to Europe, the very first time she says to me, come here, sit down, I'm going to talk to you. So she said, so you're going over there to the other side? And I said, yeah, I'm going to the other side. And she says, do me a favor. Whoever you're going to talk to over there, tell them to tell these people on this side to behave. To behave. They're destroying everything over here. Because they came from there. They know what they left. They know the disasters that came from that. She goes, but the Creator must have made this happen because in America, this place they call America, we're so diverse, so many people from all over the world. Can you imagine if we do things right and we could help the rest of the world where it should? And that's the hope she gave me. That's what she planted in me. And that's why I am where I am doing. I get criticized for it. But there's only one God, there's only one people, there's only one race, there's only one earth. All our children are the same. So I just want to leave you with that because I applaud you for all your work and what you're venturing into and what you've been doing. Don't give up. There's people like us that are fighting on the backside. We need you guys. Every documentation you can make, every change that you can do it. Make moral decisions. Got to make moral decisions because people are hurting. I see people on the streets, people suffering. They say there's no free health care and nobody understands it. Hell, they give Native people free health care. Let's see why they can't do it for anybody else. I always say if they want to help their people, send them to us. We'll take care of them. Don't ever turn anybody away because that's the way we are as Indian people. But it's just crazy. You know, they're still at Old Flats trying to find some more medicine plants so they could use it in their pharmacies. I'm like, well, why are you going to destroy this place? Doesn't make any sense. It's a corporate world. It's a corporate world. And that's why I applaud universities are now having Native people come talk, and me being one of them. It's because what they feel is that they're educating all these kids, and the top echelons of them are being taken by corporations, and everybody else is taken by corporations. So from all the knowledge they learn, the next one that's fed to them is the corporate world. So now they feel bad, and so they want to create some kind of class to where they can talk to freshmen about the earth, why it's so important, so that they could be real, more better decisions made on these critical issues that we're facing. So I'm hopeful, you know, I got to keep moving. My mother used to tell me, "You're going to live my life." Now I would say, "When I'm going to live mine?" Because, well, everything you're doing is what I wish I could have been doing. But your children will live your life. It'll get better. You have to keep moving. So, if anything, remember the cross country. Be where you should be. Others will catch up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ashley?
Mahalo for those. Thank you for those comments. I really appreciated listening to that. I don't know how to follow you. You know, I think goes without saying that our experience isn't good all the time. And I'm speaking again about Hawaiians and I guess Indigenous people in general. I mean, we get good laws sometimes, and then, you know, the Supreme Court will hand down a really good decision. And then next legislative session, there's a bill that changes the law to, you know, basically undo all that we've worked on for the years before. So always walking uphill. But I agree. I mean, I will say that I am hopeful. I think Mauna Kea, that's one of the reasons that I'm here, stirred up interest and brought our people together in a way that they hadn't been before. It was almost like another Hawaiian Renaissance. There were tens of thousands of people that over the span of those months weeks in 2019, people coming to the mountain and standing for the right to protect this place. And I think it just shows that people are now starting to pay attention, starting to get educated about their rights and how the laws and governmental processes work. And I think before it may have only been limited to a handful of people who really kind of paid attention to these things. And I'm seeing more Hawaiians pay attention. And being here today, I mean, obviously it's more than that. There are, you know, young people across the country that are paying attention. And I love seeing that. That makes me feel happy. And if Mauna Kea can be a symbol of that for us and for you folks too, just to kind of like how important it is to stand and be in the right place. I just think that's such a cool thing to think about. And forums like this where our groups can share with each other and we can learn, I can learn. There's a whole lot I don't know about, you know, Native, like American tribal law and federal Indian law and just the way things work. It's a work in progress for me and I'm trying my best to catch up. But I think, you know, being able to collaborate, learn from each other's successes, bring each other forward together and being as inclusive as possible every step of the way. Because if one group is succeeding, I think it helps that we can pull each other forward to all succeed. And so the fact that students put this together and gave us this opportunity and gave me this opportunity to meet these pillars in the community that I never would have had the opportunity to meet before is just great. And I think I have a newfound interest and I just, yeah, I feel hopeful and I hope that we have the opportunity to collaborate more. There is a Olelo no ea, which is a Hawaiian proverb that goes, "Ohe hana nui ke alu ia," and it says, "No task is too big when done together by all." So I just think if we all keep doing our part and working together, that there is hope. And so just wanted to send my aloha and mahalo to all of you for having me here today. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hey, Jared, you get the last word.
Miigwech, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be able to speak to my alumni as an alumni to my alma mater. Because students, enjoy your time in law school. I liked law school so much, I went back and did it again. But I really enjoyed going back and going internationally and learning. Space law came pretty easy. I'm an aviation buff, and it's all treaty based, so I had a little bit of knowledge about that going in. But it's an opportunity to meet people that you're going to know the rest of your lives, and make friends. Never stop learning. I want to have faith in yourself. I'm going to be a little wordy again. I'm going to tell you a couple of anecdotes. Back when I was first starting out with Congressman Conyers, I went to him with a couple of dear colleagues, and dear colleagues are the letters that go out to the congressmen and senators saying, sign on to my bill, co-sponsor this letter with me, blah, blah, blah. And I brought him 4 or 5, and he said, come on, man. That's why I hired you, man. I trust you. I was like, wow, that was amazing. Trust yourselves. Go to your sacred place, listen to yourself, have faith in yourself, be true to yourself. Plant a tree. Some of the trees that I planted in 2018 are over 6 feet tall now. Best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but second best time's right now. It's hard. We're in hard times. The people are coming for your rights. We've lost our reproductive freedoms. Our sisters have, our wives have, our daughters have. They're coming for your right to vote. They're kicking their legislators out of our legislative bodies. But John Lewis, right before he passed, left us with some good language. Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Do not become bitter or hostile. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble. We will find a way to make a way out of no way. Be true to yourself. Stand up for what's right. Stand with your friends, make friends, find ways to innovate, look to other countries, laws and systems of governance, and let's find a way to innovate and change how our system works and make it better and make it work for all of us.
Thank you so much. I am going to officially close the panel at this point in time. I want you each to know how much your words mean to me. I'm literally tearing up hearing all of you, and that love that you have for our students and our people is just amazing. I have been receiving messages as you've been speaking. I've been receiving emails, text messages, and notes saying how much people appreciate everything that you're saying. They're watching from all different time zones. They want the recording for anything that they might have missed because of their time zone. So you have made our entire event such a success with your words and your passion and your leadership. Dr. Nosie, my prayers for your family. And Jared and Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Annalisa on site, who will make announcements about lunch. But thank you. You guys are amazing. Round of applause for you guys.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We are going to wrap up here. We have lunch outside, so please go and get food. And we will try and to do our best to start the next panel on time. Sorry, we shortened your lunch hour a little bit, but we will be back in here at 12:15. And the food is on, oh, thank you, 1:15. The food is over here. There are, I think, 2 groups outside having food. Ours is the really good stuff from Cafe Santa Rosa. So if you need any help finding it, there are people out there. Thank you.